And welcome back to This Week. Time now to get the views of our political experts. Chris Walker, who used to work for the Romney and George W. Bush campaign, is now a vice president at JDA Frontline, and Democratic political strategist John Rowley with Fletcher Rowley here in Nashville. Gentlemen, nice to see you both. We'll get to the specifics, but you guys both work with candidates, both worked with campaigns. I hand you Donald Trump. How do you fix this? The message is easy. It's officially on every side of every issue, and I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm saying that's the reality. If you're working for this campaign, how do you get that message out there when it changes hourly, daily, on every issue?
You're asking me.
I'm asking you both.
Got it.
I'll let him go first.
Well, he's the sort of person that as people who work in politics, we would probably, there are candidates somewhat like Trump out there, and you figure that out before you even go to work with them, and you wouldn't even work with them. Because if you are an advisor and the candidate will not take advice, even if you make a lot of money, it's no fun and it's not very satisfying. And so I have been in situations where people just wouldn't take much advice, and then you're just trying to essentially make small little adjustments to rein them in and do as little harm as possible. And I think part of the problem is, I mean, no matter what you think about political consultants and advisors, presidents and presidential candidates forever have had them. We literally have someone who to run a country or run a campaign, you need a lot of best practices. Yep. and people around you as leaders, and he's essentially running a dictatorship campaign, and it's really unmanageable the way he's doing it. So.
You buy a lot of stock in Jack Daniels. That's what you do. You know, what you're seeing here is a campaign where the candidate really loves to watch himself on TV and then reacts to it. And there's not really any kind of core belief structure or core message that he's trying to convey. He'll say something, watch the reaction on cable, and then change it the next day. That's a terrible way to run a campaign because you have no consistency of message, and we've seen that this week with his campaign advisors kind of trying to say things like, well, he didn't flip-flop, he's just changed his words. I mean, that's, it's an unenviable position, but at the end of the day, what you have to do, and if I were advising the Trump campaign, I'd say get back to the basics. You talked about making America great again. How are you going to do that? What are you going to do to make that happen? People feel a need and a connection to that, and they want to make sure that they can see that manifest in what he's trying to do. He's not talking about that right now, and it's killing him.
The good news for the Trump folks, his supporters have proven to be, until now anyway, unbreakable. It doesn't matter what he says. They like him for what he speaks, the way he speaks. But now we're getting into really questionable ground where the pillar of his campaign, this immigration stance that he has promised since day one to deport the 11+ million folks to build the wall, is crumbling in some areas. He's changing on it, going back to it. It's unclear where it stands now. The question seems to be, is this the breaking point for those unbreakables who are supporting Donald Trump?
You know, he's always had a ceiling all along. I mean, I think that's been one of the key elements of the primary is that, you know, you had a 12-person primary and he always got a consistent percentage. That number probably stays the same throughout. I mean, there's people that's going to run through a wall for him no matter what. The problem is what we're seeing in swing state polls, the red states are getting purple because of what he's saying. So there's a primary election and a general election. He's completely forsaken the general in favor of primary, and we're seeing that manifest in poll after poll where states like Utah and Arizona and Georgia, which should be solid red, are now within play, which is an absurd reality for a campaign that's trying to win nationally.
Well, and Richard Nixon used to have a tenet of, when you run for president as a Republican, you fake right and then move left. And Trump is essentially not only faked right, but he's gone 100 miles an hour to the right, and he's staying right. And I think, you know, probably the key state to watch in this presidential election, because the math just so works in Democrats' favor, because we could lose Florida and Ohio and still win the presidency. The key state, which really Trump cannot win without, is Pennsylvania, and he is between 9 and 11 points behind. So no matter what the national polls say, is Hillary up 8, is Hillary up 4, watch Pennsylvania. It's been very consistent. He's 8 to 11 points behind, and I don't think there's a path for him without Pennsylvania.
Hillary Clinton has her own issues, has high negatives. She's been really off the campaign trail a while. Fundraising back on this week, making some speeches, talking to some media, hasn't held the news conference as she's been criticized for. You know, the allegations of pay for play, the emails continue to plague her, and yet the Republicans don't seem to be making hay on what are really could be fatal errors on her part that she has gotten away with. She did this week for the first time say, there was no excuse, I shouldn't have done it, I apologize, I would do it differently. Is that enough?
Well, it'll probably be enough to beat Trump. I think whether they've got a lot of work to do on how they're handling these crises.
Yep.
I mean, just down to basics of every time Hillary Clinton's under attack, her posture changes. And you watch the video of her going after Donald Trump, and she has an awe, just a calm and a zen about her, and then she's under assault, and it's just so obvious. You don't have to be a political expert to notice it. But I mean, the Clinton Foundation, they've got to end the Clinton Foundation as we know it, or it's going to plague her throughout her presidency. And it's not fair because it does a lot of good in the world. But if you want to be president, you're going to have to do some things you don't like. And so I think there's been a little bit of the basic, the old fighter Jack Dempsey used to have a saying about boxing that translates to politics, that everybody's got a plan until they get hit. And I think her campaign has had a magnificent plan. They just haven't anticipated enough of these punches, whether it's coming from the Republicans or coming from kind of some of the right-wing media. And it's not too late, but I think whether it's as president or in the final phase of this campaign going into debates, they've got to get ready for these punches that they're already being hit with, in addition to some they haven't been hit with.
She's been criticized for not campaigning, in part because we've seen when she goes out there a lot, her numbers go down. You've got two candidates with extremely high negatives, so for them, running a four corners offense actually makes sense. If they can let Trump kind of continue to be Trump, they could try to hopefully wait this thing out. Ultimately, she's going to have to make the case, and we're going to see these polls tightening because it naturally will. And it'll all come down to the debates here in September and October, where historic numbers of viewers will watch these things, and people can actually make the case themselves. I will argue that it will be very interesting to see how these two interact and how they work together. Right now, we're kind of seeing that take place, but them sharing the stage together is going to be the key moment where all this happens. And again, from a advisor standpoint, I would be very nervous if I were Trump on how to handle interactions in that kind of format.
Just a few seconds to go. This campaign has turned into, if you're a Democrat, you have to vote against Donald Trump. If you're a Republican, you have to vote against Hillary Clinton. Will it ever get back to the middle, or is this where we are until it's over with?
I think this year it stays pretty much a never Trump or a never Hillary type environment, but the pendulum always swings back. This is an outlier election. I don't think this is what we're going to see in the future.
It's just when you think it can't get any darker, it'll get pitch black. I mean, it's been a rough cycle.
And the debates, as you think, and I agree with, there are going to be some must-see TV moments in there.
Great political theater, no doubt.
Chris Walker, John Rowley, appreciate your time and insight. Stay with us as we continue in a moment.